Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to Apocrypha, Voices of the Hidden. As we are here every Friday, Adius Day, Mystic Salon, we are joined with here Angela Satanica. Okay. Our first actual theistic Satanist being on the show, right? As I've said many times before, I'm not a Satanist. I don't claim to be a Satanist. I do work with demons, but I'm not going to sit here and say, hey, yeah, I'm a theistic Satanist, because that's just not true, right? So the best way to talk about theistic Satanism is to actually find a few and get them on the show. You wouldn't believe how difficult that is. It's not easy. So the fact that we found a few that are willing to be on the show, we're making progress here. So Angela has a project called Sanctuary Satanica, which, I mean, just by the name alone, it kind of has this, that idea of, well, sanctuary, right? Like, it's a safe spot for people to kind of openly be, theistic Satanists. So Angela, let's just jump right into it here. So what does it mean to you to be a theistic Satanist?
So there's a couple different categories, under that umbrella of theistic. And I kind of outwardly identify more as like the spiritual variety more than the religious, but I've been leaning into more religious Satanism every once in a while. For me, it means ultimately devotion and embodiment of Satan. So we may all have different views of who Satan is and what Satan is, but we acknowledge that as a sort of divinity, or a sort of, to me, like an evil divinity that holds wisdom within me, around me, guides me. I see, it doesn't matter to me as much to emphasize that he's external, because to me he's omnipresent. So he's within me, he's outside of me, he's a consciousness I can speak with, he's also something I feel within me. He may not be a he to some people, but to me it's ultimately about devotion. It's about acknowledging kind of what's backwards about the world around you, through that devotion, and really sticking through the challenges and sticking through being misunderstood. That's a big part of the package. You're going to be inevitably misunderstood on this path.
No, yeah, most definitely. I mean, simply being involved in the left-hand path, I mean, there's a significant amount of, misunderstanding that happens there, right? And, it's kind of hard to try to explain to people what it is, Yeah. I mean, I for the left-hand path, I look at the left-hand path and I say, okay, for me, the left-hand path on a philosophical level is the idea of accepting the fact that there are darker aspects to ourselves that need accepting, that need inclusion of ourselves, because by denying those aspects of ourselves, we're still denying literally a part of ourselves that exists, and we can never truly kind of live inside of a presence of balance if we're denying those aspects to ourselves. The difficult part to explain, what confuses the shit out of people, is when I sit there and say, you have to delete your concepts of black, darkness, and shadow to fully understand what I'm talking about, because black magic isn't necessarily black magic. That's intention, which makes it positive or negative. And then darkness isn't to say darkness is a bad thing, nor shadow as a negative or hidden thing. But nonetheless, still something that exists inside of us. And then people just kind of go, huh? You know, like
Yeah.
the gif with the rabbit with the
And
confused
imagine
face.
explaining that's your God. Imagine explaining all of that is your God to people. Like, yeah, everything you've ever known as like evil and everything that was like every evil thing that's been blamed on this one entity. Yeah, that's what I like call God to me. And people are like, why? You know, people are like, what the fuck is wrong with you? And
Yep.
I'm like, I didn't go looking for it, but you know, it happened and I achieved a lot of wisdom out of it that is just so difficult to explain to people who don't even get that basic,
Mm-hmm.
you know, concept of the duality in non-duality. It's like the left-hand path to me has always been like interesting if you take like an adversarial take on it to
Mm-hmm.
sort of like embody the things that you feel you're opposite then that you feel that you're against.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in a way like it's you have to have dualism to even find it, but then you're like erasing it and then recreating it and it's like
Yep.
this dance with the shadow over and over again.
It
I think we
is.
talked about that last week,
Yeah.
didn't we? A little bit about the alchemy of the things that are on a I don't want to say polarity because I just hate that phrasing, but the
Mm.
idea of how much easier it is to flip the switch of things that are two completely negatives or opposing to each other and make them something better by understanding where each of them fit. Because if you know one thing, you know its opposite, right? And that's something you can kind of pull in together, which I think is awesome. And it's hard to explain because to me, part of sorry, there's a whole bunch of ambulance and fire trucks going down the street. Part of it for me is really trying to understand or help people understand it's not just two things because that's what people see or think about
Mm-hmm.
when you're talking about these lightness and darkness. It's two things, like it's just an infinite number of many
Mm-hmm.
things, and it's just easier to believe too, and it's easier to take what somebody has taught you and be like, I don't want to challenge that difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, definitely. I mean, I've talked about that before. Kind of like an opposite doesn't necessarily mean negative, right? Like the way that
Mm-hmm.
we kind of we try to put the human brain, I think, needs to understand, kind of like needs to have some level of duality in it, right? The positive and the negative. And it's a really, even me, like somebody that preaches this shit, it's hard for me sometimes to fully grasp the concepts that I'm throwing out there, you know. And I'm saying, you know, this isn't, you know, evil, you know, this isn't bad, right? You know, these aspects are just on a spectrum, and opposite doesn't mean negative. Like your actions, choices, there are no bad choices. There's just consequences to choices that you don't prefer, that you don't like.
Yeah, and like even say using the actual meaning of the word negative, which means to negate or take away. When you saying the word negative, people associate that with negativity, and I'm like, I'm not even talking about negativity. Like, like, you know, you're talking about, like I'm talking about the action of negating something. Like it's so difficult to like unprogram what
Mm-hmm.
so much of like so many different societies, but especially Western society, like ingrains that we stand on this side, everyone else on that side. Like, I'm not going to cross this barrier because I'm going to learn something I'm going to not be able to handle or whatever. And it's interesting you brought up like evil because like people have asked me, you know, like, well, what is your view on evil? Like um, you know, you worship the devil in your own words, like you worship the devil. So what is your like take on evil? And I'm like, well, there's only a few acts I consider like truly evil, like because they have no justification for them. Everything else to me is like a matter of perspective, and something may feel evil to me, but not evil to another person. Like there's only like a few things I would consider like grossly disgusting, which would be like sexual assault, like genocide, things like that, that have no survival mechanism behind them. They have no justification behind them. They have no safety mechanism behind them. Um, but I feel like for the most part, the majority of history, whoever gets to decide what is evil is whoever like won the argument or won, you know, the war or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's always just been like what we don't prefer. you know. Even like earlier works in, say like the Bible, or like people talk about Deuteronomy a lot, like the rules in Leviticus and things like that. Um, a lot of that, like to say something was evil is just to get people like not to eat infected food. Like it's just like we're going to put this in the Bible so people like actually listen to us when we say like this is going to infect them. Or maybe they just had a different worldview at the time of like this causes illness, therefore it's evil. Like don't eat it. Don't eat that type of meat. Don't wear that type of clothing because it's like makes your skin itchy or whatever, and that must be evil. Must be a demon in there. Um, so it's just sort of like a different way of understanding, and I never really see it as like a truly moral thing. Actually, like I don't really give a shit about morals because they're formed by institutions, whereas ethics are applicable to individuals in situations and contexts. um so that's my priming as a witch, I guess. I just didn't give a fuck about morals to begin with.
I mean, morality, generally speaking, is perspective. I mean, that psychological argument has been made 1,000 times. I mean, especially after like, Ed Gein, right? I mean, it was really dug into like with, somebody of that, in that situation, I suppose we could say, right? In finding the things that were in Ed Gein's house and things like that. He lived very secluded from, the rest of people in society. His mother had made sure that he was very secluded from people in society. And so, his moral compass did not match that of what generalized society would say was acceptable. But he saw no, moral degradation in anything that he was doing. And so it definitely begs the question, what is morality and what are we basing it off of? Generally speaking, I think the easiest way to break it down, the most logical way to break it down, is just things that, generally speaking, us as human beings dislike happening to our individual, to our person, right? Being attacked for no reason, having things stolen from us, murder, things of that. And then even those things inside of morality have their own gray areas, right? Like murder, for example, especially if you're in the United States and you're in a state like Florida or Texas, where, somebody breaks into your house, no questions asked, you just shoot them. I mean, most states are pretty much like that, I think, except for like New York. I think New York is like...
I mean, not every state has like stand your ground laws, but even just if we're looking morally and not legally, plenty of people would side with someone defending themselves.
Mm-hmm.
In that sort of situation. Well, like my home was broken into,
Yep.
and I defended myself, and they happened to die. That was more like manslaughter rather than murder.
Yep.
I didn't premeditate this. I didn't plan this out. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't seek someone out to victimize them. They victimized me.
Yep.
So like I think most people, like that's like about context. To sort of like delve into isolation for a minute, I think that's
Mm-hmm.
something that on the left-hand path, and especially like in devotion to the devil, you can run into a lot, and you go through periods of that. But I think integration back into like some form of society, and being a witch taught me this a lot. Like the witch lives on the edge of the village. She's between the people and the wilderness, and it's her job to go between them, and it's her job to bring a little weird to the people so that their society gets expands and like does things differently, doesn't just stay the same. And these days it's harder and harder for weird people to simply just do their job, and so we get limited and limited and limited. It's harder between like the gap between like people who are not fitting in and people who do. And I feel like when it comes to, random acts of violence or a lack of empathy or things like that, is because, people are not getting their human needs met. I think that's something that gets like left out in morality. I'm like, we would have to grow up to be sort of a healthy person to even function morally
Mm-hmm.
or to function ethically, like to make decisions like that, decisions about how to treat other people. You need to have some of your needs met as a human being. Like you need to have a lot of needs met as a human being. Fairly consistently, so that you are not making choices that are ultimately harmful to yourself. Like you can harm other people and think you're fine and get away with it for a long time, but it is damaging to your own brain to do so. You can cause
Mm-hmm.
PTSD in yourself for harming other people.
Mm-hmm.
So having that integration and recognizing where our human limitations is, which is apparently very difficult for some magicians to do. But
I think I'm definitely of the mindset, and I know there's a lot of people out there that disagree with me on this. So I'm a person that believes that we were never designed to have the amount of contact that we have currently with other people. I believe that we are social creatures, but social creatures within the context of what would be considered our tribe, right? Like our small group, our community, right? So it could go anywhere from 40 to 100 people, maybe, right? We were never designed to live in large cities with millions of people and then have social media that has connection to billions of people. Our brains were not designed to have that much stimulus happening at the same time. It just simply was not. We're not built that way, and the way things are moving forward, they're moving forward so quickly that the evolutionary process of the human mind can't keep up with what we're doing to it.
It's numbing.
Mm-hmm. And so we're just
I find
shutting
myself
down.
like I don't even like I find myself shutting down, but I'm like a bubbling ball of like rage. Like I just don't want to interact with anyone. You know, I'll like disappear for like months at a time off everything. And I'll like disappear. I will disappear not just like offline. I'll disappear like from my real life friends. I'm just like I'm not talking to anyone. Like I need to be alone. I need to create. I need to like recalibrate and like get back to
Yeah.
self levels. I can't deal with this shit right now. And everyone's asking something of me, or everyone's like wanting my attention, or like, what do I think of this, or what do I think of that? And I'm like, just think for yourself for a second. Just go think for yourself for a second. Like I'm trying to do that for me. Can you do that for you? Like, that's all I really preach anyway. So I just
Right.
think that's all I'm really gonna tell you. So can I just like recalibrate? Yeah, no, I find like I go through different stages of like feeling that fatigue, that social fatigue when I haven't even been properly socializing the way I even want to because of the pace of the world around me. Like it's it's stressful now. It's not this I feel the shift even in the internet, what
Yep.
the internet used to be versus what it is now. Like YouTube especially. I'm like, wow, it's changed
Mm-hmm.
so much.
Well, it used to be, I mean, for me, it used to be information. Like, well, that's what I loved about the internet as a kid is if I wanted to know about something, I could look it up and then I could investigate it and I could read about it. And, like it was just a giant encyclopedia of fucking everything, And now, how do I put this without pissing off everybody? Now it's just everyone's fucking opinion. And it's like, that's fine. There's a place for that. Go ahead.
So I relate to that definitely, like the endless information. For me, because I read so many books, the factual information definitely adds value, definitely was great. But I was so interested in it's reflected in my degree. Like I was interested in the personal information, so to speak. So when I got into like witchcraft, I was like, yes, I've read all these books, but I want to know how like witches live. I want to know how like what kinds of people are interested in witchcraft, like realistically, not just these like people in robes that are in the books. Like, what are they like as real people? And I learned so much more from people's personal experiences with the craft, their personal pitfalls, their personal like achievements and the things they would come up with, and it would just inspire me to like do my own thing, or get out into like the wilderness and figure something else out and then share it. It was a lot more about exchange when it came to social media and with content creation. And it was a lot more like grounded and down to earth. Now I feel it's all about selling people something. I feel it's all about like selling you a personality, selling you like a vibe, an aesthetic, product, indirectly or directly. And I just sort of like I don't vibe with it. I tried it out for a second on TikTok, hated it. So I was like, nah, I can't do this anymore.
I'm gonna start on TikTok.
Yeah, and like I just find people expecting me to do that as I create content. I'm trying to do so from that like place of like this is my experience. I'm not here to like really preach or teach you. I'm not your fucking teacher. If I were, you would be incredibly frustrated because I wouldn't hold your hand,
Mm-hmm.
and I would put you in situations that would frustrate the shit out of you because you have the privilege of having a teacher. I had to learn this shit on the streets.
Mm-hmm.
So like, so I'm gonna be a little harsh as your fucking teacher if I were to be your mentor. So you don't even want that. I'm not ready for it. You're not ready for it. And I find that like there are people who straight up like see their content and their practice as one thing. And like
Mm-hmm.
that scares me deeply. Like that scares me for all the people who are interested in becoming, practitioners of anything, occult related. Um, it doesn't seem to happen too much like in the satanic devotion aspect. It happens a
Mm-hmm.
lot more in like witchcraft. But
Mhm.
I never thought witchcraft would be commodified to this degree ever in my life. It goes in and out of trends every once in a while, but it's commodified on such a scale that it looks so much like the yoga booms in the West and like the crystal, like it's just very much another trend to a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people. A lot of people are going to get sick of it and bored of it. Some people will stick, and get deeper and learn more. Some people will stay where they're at, and that's fine. But a lot of people are going to be leaving it and putting their nose up at it, the way
Mm-hmm.
a lot of occultists do with Wicca. It's just kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So I just find it sad that like the internet, the way everything on the internet, not just occult material, but like just having an Instagram, people expect you to try to be an influencer. People
Mm-hmm.
expect you to try to get sponsorships and all these things. I'm like, I'm just posting because I liked this fucking moment in my life, Like I thought that's what we were doing. Like I thought
Mm-hmm.
like it's just like a person using social media or I have this new project going on. Like I'm just doing that. I'm not trying to constantly gain approval or sell you something. Sometimes I'm just sharing. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's what I thought we were doing.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I remember when Instagram used to be like more artistic in nature. Like, it was
Yeah.
actual photographers taking pictures, then editing it, and then, uploading it and stuff like that. Or, people that were doing graphic design or their paintings. It used to be a lot of art. But the thing that's funny is, as I can't mark exactly when the switch happened, but when all of this stuff started that I can remember back in MySpace, like the original MySpace, like the pre Justin Timberlake buying it and turning into shit, kind of thing. It was called social networking. It was a social network. And the name is
That's right,
very
yeah.
important. It was to network. It was to grow your network, to meet new people. And it very quickly, once Facebook came in, changed from social networking to social media. What's the difference between networking and media? Well, networking, you meet, you grow, you go out and you do things. Media is consumption.
Correct. Yeah.
They changed the name and nobody even noticed.
Yeah, and that I think summarizes it because it's like it goes from being an exchange to being entertain me.
Mm-hmm.
Entertain me. Why aren't you entertaining me? Like I'll get comments, every once in a while, like you should make shorter form content, more of it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I tried it. You know what happened? I made shit content and no one even paid attention because there was so much of it that I already answered people's questions
Mm-hmm.
and they were asking the same questions anyway. So I'm not gonna go over the same thing twice
Mm-hmm.
unless I want to. Absolutely not. No. You can sit through a half hour of me talking to a camera if you want to, or you can watch somebody else.
Yeah.
Like
I'm laughing because I think that it was one of the first videos I watched of you that I just fell in love with, and it was like, I'm going to say it once because I'm not saying it because you keep asking me, and here it is. And I just thought I just loved the way it came out. This is great because it's how things are. People want it fed to them. They want all their stuff on the
handheld.
Yeah, and it's I mean, that's unfortunate. It's kind of a product of what we've created with all this stuff, but it doesn't mean it has to be that way. Like the most important thing that I've done in the past year of my life has been reading on my own and then meeting with a small group of people and talking about what we read ourselves and just hashing it out. What do you think about this? How do you feel about that? What's that mean? Don't need anybody there with us. Don't need to make a video about it. We just talk about shit. And sometimes we're like, well, that's stupid. And maybe it is. And you learn a little bit about it and you spend time. But I really have shied away. The only thing I use social media for anymore is entertainment. And that is to watch Scottish men read funny, embarrassing stories. I don't know why. It's my thing. And cat videos. But other than that, And other than that, right, it's YouTube is effective, and to me, in things like this, because we have conversations about things, three very different people, and then if you're reading what's going on in chat and how people are talking about different aspects and things that are completely different, this is to me what the social networking part of the growth was supposed to be. But it's hard. It's really hard to find out there because it is all about selling something, and that's.
Well, I mean, that also, like, I mean, the basis of kind of what we're talking about. One of the reasons why I approached Mystic to be the co-host of the show is because he disagreed with me on so much shit, and I was like, "Dude, would you be on the show?" And he kind of looked at me like when he first mentioned it, he's like, "Really?" I was like, "Yeah, I don't want somebody that agrees with me. I want somebody that's going to challenge my ideas. I don't want it to be a fucking echo chamber." Like, I want somebody to say, no, you're full of shit. I don't agree with that. You know, this is what I think. So that way everyone has a place. Like, people in the chat, for example, don't feel like they have to be one specific way to be a part of this community. Because if I'm the only one representing it, it's going to be dark. It's going to be satanic in a way. It's going to be full of demons. It's going to be, and that's all it's going to be because that's me. Right? Throwing Mystic into it throws a whole other fucking spectrum on it. You know, so I was like, yeah, it needs that. It needs that challenge. I want to be challenged. I don't want to be agreed with. Like, if you agree with me, fine. But if you don't, I want somebody that's going to have, you know, that's going to be like, no, I disagree. And then
let's be honest, I disagree on purpose. Like,
this is true.
I don't even disagree
sometimes. You do that sometimes. You disagree just to disagree.
Yeah. And then afterwards, like, well, I actually agree with you, but that's not the point here. The point is, you know, it's just that we talked about the negative space, right?
I'm that. Yeah. What's your big three?
Yeah. Yeah, it's really important.
What's your big three astrology-wise? I'm just curious.
What's my who, what?
Your big three in astrology.
Oh, so I am a Virgo moon, a Taurus, Virgo moon, Virgo sun. I've had only 2 drinks, I swear to God. Virgo sun, Virgo moon, Taurus rising. I know my whole chart, but I'll get there.
I'm a Virgo sun, Virgo moon as well.
That's hilarious.
See,
Aries rising. So I was like, I spotted another Virgo with that. I agree with you, but I'm just going to point out the problem in your argument anyway. Like,
exactly. Yep.
So
the Mercury.
but I mean, it keeps it interesting though, like, and it keeps the conversation going. You know, and it's important to, and also to see that, like, there are certain things that we fundamentally disagree on that we've talked about publicly,
and can still come in here and talk.
That we're not going to talk about here, but we'll say that it's political. And so we are on I don't want to say totally opposite sides, but we actually sat down in private.
Oh, we were totally on opposite sides, and you were wrong on that.
we said, well, first we sat down in private and we had the conversation because I felt that it was a conversation that shouldn't have been televised the first time it's brought up, right? Yeah. So we sat down in private, we had the conversation. I'm like, look, I feel this way, and this is why I feel this way. I want to know what you think, what you feel, and why you feel the way you feel. I want to know. And we sat down and we had the conversation, and yeah, we disagreed with each other, but we both understood each other. Though we disagreed, we understood where the other one was coming from, which is very important to find common ground. You can disagree with someone, but you can still understand why they made the choice that they did. And then we brought it and we've made it public. And we wanted people to see that because we wanted people to see, look, we fundamentally disagree with each other, regardless of understanding each other's reasons of why he did this, why I did this, whatever. But we're still friends. We're still talking to each other, and it doesn't matter. You know, it doesn't need to be a hate fest.
I mean, the only time that I really let that kind of thing affect me is because it's already affecting me. That makes sense. Like, if someone straight up says to me, like, I'm a fan of Andrew Tate, I'm gonna be like, I'm not safe around you, so bye. Like, you know, like, I'm not gonna tolerate.
Yeah, no.
Like, you know,
well, to a degree, right? There's no need. There's no need for that, right? But if someone
says to me, like, hey, like, I used to be a fan of Jordan Peterson, and, like, I have these ideas going on, and I'd be like, okay, well, where are these coming from? Like, you know, like, I can have, like, the uncomfortable conversation, but it gets to a point where, like, I'm like, I'm not debating someone who wants me dead, or, like, wants to, like, hurt me. Like, you know, we're just gonna not. But, like, I value that. I love that, having like kind of different people around you. I've always loved like the diversity of the occult world that really gets like represented in certain spaces, because I feel like people want to like clean up the occult world in such a way. They don't want to show, you know, people who do like folk practices that may involve like
Mhm.
animal sacrifice. They don't want to show, you know, people like us who like summon demons, you know, invoke demons.
Yep.
Like they don't want to show people who dance naked in the woods even anymore. So like it's
Mhm.
a very like curated kind of image. Even I've noticed it even amongst like some chaos magicians, to be honest, you know, being like snooty, looking down at the left hand path, and I'm like, that's funny because like chaos magic is left hand path, like
Mhm.
kind of weird, like kind of weird you say that, you know, because like there's so many tropes that have been associated with these terms that used to be much broader. You
Mhm.
know, to me, left hand path like a few years ago never meant specifically working with demons. You know, and
Mhm.
now there are people who think that because they work with demons, they're left hand path. I'm like, not
Nope.
necessarily, you know, not by default. Certainly not with like Solomonic methods, in my opinion. Um, you know, like, and I would consider like demodulators, although they're akin to like
Mhm.
some people consider like we're a type of theistic Satanist. I would say, yeah, you know, sure. But demonology to me is a very right hand path religion. You know, the way
Mhm.
it functions and the way that it's structured, and that's totally okay. So it's kind of like this outlier that gets like labeled left hand path when people mean dark, and I kind of get frustrated because I'm like, so much of the wisdom of the left hand gets lost, but that's kind of the point, I guess. It's like
Yep.
it's you have to really search for it. So if it hides behind a gimmick, it hides behind a gimmick.
Well,
There
I
you
mean, it
go.
goes back to kind of like
Yeah.
what you mentioned about like all creators trying to sell stuff or people waiting for you to sell something. Like everyone's trying to find their niche and then take that niche and then like try to make it blow up so that way they can, you know, sell a bunch of products or courses or
Yeah.
spells or rituals.
But we have to also be honest, that's how occult literature has been sold for hundreds of years. So
True.
like, you know,
True.
now we have a perfected way of like niching ourselves, and you know, I'm a sea crystal witch, you know, like it gets like so specific to the point that we're not describing practical practices anymore. But you know, how many occult titles have I bought that the titles reflected nothing in the fucking text? You know, like
Mhm.
so it's
Yep.
like, you know, we all market shit you know, in a frustrating kind of way. Like we all kind of pull that for our own reasons. I think the beauty in um, the weird kind of dualistic beauty in like things being taken for granted, things being kind of like shallowified and watered down is, well, only those who are truly seeking it are going to look deeper. Like only those who
Mhm.
truly care are going to look deeper, because it's harder to do that now. It's
Mhm.
harder to get to like the core truth and to really create something. And I feel like what truly makes something like, if you're someone who looks into self-deification, for example, is popular in
Mhm.
the left-hand path. Like, I'm someone that, you know, other theistic Satanists might not pursue that. I am someone who is. Um, like that is something where you're gonna have to like literally shut yourself away from the world for a minute and just look deep within and find something that didn't come from outside of you. And
Mhm.
that's a lot harder than it sounds. That is
Mhm.
so much harder than it sounds. Who the fuck am I outside of labels? Like who the
Mhm.
fuck am I outside of who I have proximity to and what I've been through and what has been done to me and what I've overcome and like how I present myself and my gender and my race and all these stupid things. Like, who am I? You know, beyond my name, beyond like everything, beyond incarnations I may remember. Like, who am I? Getting to that core, that black flame, like, is
Mhm.
harder than people want to hear. They want to just do a mantra and think
Uh-huh.
that they're deified, you know, like, and I'm like, that it's like work. It's like unraveling who you are and rebuilding it. Like, this is real work. This is philosophical work. This is physical work. This is spiritual work. This is socially interacting with people
Mhm.
sometimes work. Like, I had to face the truth, you know, as someone who was drawn to witchcraft from a very young age, whatever the purpose may be for that. I was like, shit, that kind of makes me like the whole between worlds thing kind of makes me like, whether I like it or not, a spirit guide in a way on earth. That means I like have to help people sometimes. Like I can't always avoid it. Like I have to help people sometimes. Sometimes my very presence is helping people without me even knowing, or like, you know, I step into a space and it's no longer haunted now. Like you're welcome. Yeah, or just like
Right,
just like
right.
I'm gonna be moved around just because of what I do. But you know,
Mhm.
like the universe is gonna shift me around and I'm gonna have to interact with people who know nothing. And you know, being in Salem where there's people passing through, like you know, I work at a little witch store part-time, and like people will be passing through and they'll have questions like, what's this about, what's that about, and I try my best every time I share knowledge, to do so from a non-dogmatic place, and to do
Mhm.
so like not necessarily hiding who I am, because I'm very open, and people are, when you're open about it, some people are very receptive actually to like, you're like, oh yeah, like I work with things that other people consider evil. To me, they're beautiful and wonderful. Like, and they're like, oh,
Mhm.
okay, cool. Like, but I try my best to like leave my religion out of it, leave like my personal
Mhm.
ideas out of it, and just like present it the way that it would have saved me a lot of time.
Mhm.
Like when I was learning it, like present in a way that allows them to learn, that's natural to them. Like if I see someone struggling to feel energy, or to manipulate energy, or to see energy or perceive it in some way, I'm like, grab a pendulum. Like pendulums are the first thing I learned with, because I'm such a physical person. I'm such an earth sign. Like I'm
Mhm.
so tangible, and I'm such a skeptic about fucking everything. Being able to move a pendulum is just like the beginning, and then you start to notice, maybe you see your aura around it or whatever. Like something that's non-denominational. I find that too many people are eager to join a cult, to join like basically a replacement for church
Mhm.
when they get into this thing. And I'm like, that's not the point. You're not ready to wield, yes, you're not ready to wield like magic, like real magic that affects reality, if you're looking for someone to like lead you around. That's dangerous. Like joining a coven is not bad. If you want to be in a group, or if you want a mentor, like that's not bad, but you should be wary of people looking for you spiritually that want to shape you in a particular way for their own ends.
Mhm.
Like that is something that people are so susceptible to right now, because they're just searching for guidance. They're like, I don't want to do witchcraft wrong, so I'm going to go find someone who must be right. And it's like, you have to make mistakes
Yep.
on your own to even have a judgment of who's wrong and right. Like you can't just
Mhm.
like trust someone because they have like 50 million followers. Okay, like you shouldn't do
Yeah.
that.
No, that's definitely the wrong reason why to follow anybody. I mean, it's a craft. You have to build on it. You have to study. You have to want to do it. I mean, I remember the moment that I got tired of books. I used to have a lot of them, and my problem was every fucking book that I bought kept covering the same shit, and I'm like, all right. And I got the idea in my head. I was like, okay, so now if I want to work with the Infernal, and really nobody's talking about working with the Infernal, and I want answers, and every book I talk to says that you can actually communicate directly with these deities, with these entities. All right, fuck it. Let's communicate directly with the Infernal. Let's stop looking for, answers through the hands of man, and see what the Infernal has to say. And that's the kind of the direction that I took. And it's not to say that there isn't validity in these books or reading the books. I mean, of course there is, right? There's a space for it. It's needed. But I think it's okay if you get to that point where you're like, okay, I need something more. This isn't cutting it anymore. And that's where you really
You're
have to
making
start.
progress if you're at that point. You're making progress and you're at that point, like
Yeah.
I go through phases where I want to throw out every book. Like
Mm-hmm.
they're useless to me, at some point. Or
I mean, I'll still hit them up for references and stuff like that. Like I
yeah,
still do that, but I have 5-6 books now compared to
Mm-mm.
probably 60, 70 that I had before. I got rid of most of
I'm
them.
too attached to my books to get rid of them, but I recently had a little purge that was sort of
Oh.
accidental, but
Accidental purge.
it,
All right.
it like
Mm.
went to somebody, and then I don't know what they did with them. It's just something happened out of their control. So, I was like, well, those books will find their way to who needs them.
Mine are
I was just
organized
sort of
and on the
hoarding
spreadsheet.
old copies of like Solitary Wicca, because I like found an old copy of it that's like not the typical cover, and I was like holding on to all these texts I really didn't
Mm,
need,
right.
but yeah, I would definitely relate to like you have to go off book. And there's even like, because I have a few books I would consider advanced, but if I handed them to a beginner, they'd be extremely frustrated. They'd be like, there's no instructions in here. It's just like there's no
No
instructions in here. And I'm like,
recipe.
exactly.
Right.
I'm like, there's no instructions. This is all, they're like, it's all theory. I'm like, is it? Or does it have something that, if you know the practice, like to plug it into, like
Uh-huh.
that is useful?
Exactly.
Like then that's kind of the occult part, okay? Like, we can't spell out everything for everybody all the fucking time.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's not occult anymore, babe. Like, it's not like hidden anymore. You have to go looking.
Yep.
And where do you look? You look in the hidden place, which is within you or in the wilderness or away from the answers that or the answers that are around you all the time. You have to find new answers. You have to go outside or inside. Like you have to to like escape what is handed to you. Otherwise, we're not moving anything forward. I got so frustrated like with I still get frustrated with them. The armchair occultist type people who kind of just read, like for example, if we're talking about demons, they'll read the Goetia description, and then when they allegedly summon this demon, doesn't vary from the description at all.
I've never read the
doesn't have
Goetia.
any, doesn't have any variation, is very by the book, and I'm like, well, I personally don't look up that much about the demon before I summon them. I try not to have any preconceived ideas because, like, if you really want to talk about egregores and all that, then how are you going to test against that? How are you going to know what this spirit feels like to you if you're filling your head with other people's gnosis? I don't care how old it is. I don't care how many people have repeated it. It's just old gnosis from often hundreds of years ago, if it's even valid. And I don't know about you, but like Belial taught me about stocks. So I feel like they keep up with shit and I feel like they change as we do, So like I'm not really going to refer back to something that doesn't fit my time period and is an old version of that spirit that I'm going to be calling upon through methods I'm not even interested in using. Right. So, and I get my validation, I get my verification, if you will, through other people spontaneously sharing the same off-book gnosis with me or similar patterns of off-book gnosis with me. I don't go around telling everyone all of it so they can feed it to me. It's more like we just end up sharing a bit of information about an experience and we're like, you know what? Asmodeus told me the same fucking thing, or like he did the same thing with me, or this happened in the same way, or I saw these same colors and no books say anything about these colors, So it's like, okay, we're having similar experiences. There is some validity to something, I'm not really interested in people going like, these are the true demons versus their fake, they're all the seals. I'm like, they're all just scribbles. Like, if Belial wants me to summon him with the image of a dog, I can. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if he wants to come, he'll come. Like, it doesn't matter what I drew on the paper, okay? Yep. Like,
I mean, I say that shit all the time. Like, our altars, stuff like that. That's not for the demon. That's for us. Like the demon does not give a shit what you have in front of you when you're trying to get that communication going. That's for you to reach like a mental state or level where you're more open to receiving it. Your altar doesn't give you more power. It just helps you get to where you need to be up here to kind of open those gates of communication. That's it. It doesn't matter. If you get off on having Hello Kitty all over your shit and that's what you want to rock, go for it. Rock on. Like you don't need to have the sigils and the statues and whatever you connect with.
Create your own statues. Like people like compliment me on my altar now. I'm like, well, you understand, like my altars through the years. So I didn't have an Instagram to document all of them, but like my altars through the years, like I had little handmade things. I had nothing at some point. I had nothing but a little stone that I picked out when I was 2 years old. Like there have been times when I just drew in the sand. I went on like a camping trip by myself for like 3 days. Didn't bring anything other than like my athame, like in terms of magical tools, like my athame, a sacred stone to me, a sacred necklace, and like one tarot deck that I didn't touch, and I did everything. My altar was my fire, like I just built my fire and I would like interact with my fire and straight up like scry on the actual darkness instead of a mirror, and things like that, where like I'm in nature. Why do I need to bring in all these tools that I need for indoor work? That's moving away from what witchcraft is. Like I'm going back to, the sort of more shamanistic roots, and all I mean by that is just more natural materials like around me. I don't need everything artificial. Yeah.
I mean, it's a fucking great way to go. You know, I mean, I come from very strong Native American roots in my family. Like my grandmother's like full blood Mohawk, and so there's a lot when I was growing up with stuff like that, like being outside, nature, like connecting to it. You know, that shamanistic aspect of things. Like she would never say that she's an occultist. She would never say that, you know, she practices magic. She just communicates with the ancestors, communicates with the spirits, and that's it. She says, you call it whatever you want to call it. I just do what I do, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, it was great. I mean, it was kind of sad though, because I remember when I asked her, like when I was a kid, I was like, hey, could you teach me how to speak, you know, Native American, like the specific dialect that she spoke? She's like, no, because you're not going to need it. So there's no point in me teaching it to you, you know? But the thing was, it's like there was a point that she was trying to make, you know, like don't waste your time on things that you don't need. Like don't waste your energy into something that is not going to serve you, you know? And it's like,
That's like, yeah.
Grant you, I mean, trying to teach that lesson to a 9-year-old is, you know, not easy, but I understand it now, you know?
Yeah. There are some harsh, you know, lessons just being on any sort of spiritual path in general, but especially like if you find yourself on an adversarial one or a darker path, like there's gonna be times where you have to accept, you know, not everything's a happy ending. You know, not everything's a happy ending, and we have to keep moving forward. You have to keep like soldering on in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's certain things that are going to make you uncomfortable or sad, but using it as fuel, using it as something to motivate like forward is important, because you know you can't change the past, but you can look forward to the future where
Mm-hmm.
you know something like language. Like I'm a sociologist, anthropologist at heart, so I'm like, no, don't lose the language. Like there are valuable concepts that are embedded in language that we'll never get back. Like don't lose that. Like, you know, but like I understand from the perspective of like a people fighting for so long for basic rights that they have every right to have, you know, to be
Mm-hmm.
like, just to be reminded of how much of the language is lost while trying to teach it. I understand that labor just dragging one down and be like, no, just keep moving forward. Like that's a harsh, sad reality, but it's something that like I definitely would appreciate from a family member for sure.
Oh, yeah. I mean, she was the one that
It's
taught
rare to get
me.
that from someone
I'm
so
sorry, didn't mean to
close.
cut you off.
No, it's okay.
I was just gonna say, like, she taught me, or all of us, when we would eat at their house. So we were all meat eaters. We love it, like venison, stuff like that. But the big thing with my grandmother is we wouldn't say grace. We would say thank you to the animal at the table. Like that was the big thing. Everyone had to give some type of thanks to the animal for their sacrifice, for their sustenance that they were giving to us, you know. And that was a big thing as well that I think a lot of people skip over, you know, when they're like, just when it comes to like their connection to their food. Like food to me is very magical. I love to cook, and I think that people skip over the power of when you're cooking, because that's a ritual. That's, you know, when that you're putting seasonings in there, you're putting things together. That's a full-on ritual, my friend. You got fire going, boiling water. Like you can't get closer to Hollywood than that, you know.
I just feel like 90% of Italian witchcraft is just cooking.
So
Like the same way, like you know, your family would be like, you know, I'm not doing magic. It'd be the same way, like some of my ancestors would be like, I'm just cooking. Like I'm just cooking. Like
yeah.
and I'm praying, and that's it. Like I'm not doing anything else.
Yeah. No, most definitely, most definitely.
You know, I resonate with that. Like as a child, I was someone who had like a lot of like, despite like the environment I was growing up in, I always had this like nature first mentality. And I was just like, why am I giving thanks to a God that doesn't even fucking answer me, when I should thank the thing that died to like
Mm-hmm.
to make this meal, or I should thank the person who made the meal. Like why am I thinking someone had nothing to do with it? Like it always rubbed me the wrong way. And I mean, not that my family was huge on saying grace or anything, but I go to like other people's houses and
Mm-hmm.
they demand that of you, and I'm like, I don't know all the words. Sorry, you're gonna have to say it. So I'm just fucking hungry. I didn't know you were gonna. I'm staying for a few more minutes. Damn, like
Right. Oh yeah.
like like another weird like church story as a kid. Like they would hand out this snack. Now, even as a 4-year-old, I was like, this is a scam of a snack. Like it was like 2 animal crackers, and I'm talking like a little paper shot glass of apple juice. I was like, this is not a snack. But I was hungry all day. They put that shit in front of me. I take a bite of one of the animal crackers, and they like stared at me down, and they were like, "We have to say grace first." I was like, are you, are you for real?" Because I said thank you to the person who handed me the animal cracker. Like, are you for real? Like, I'm hungry. You're only giving me 2 of these. Like, no. I mean, Baptist churches are crazy. Like, just like, I was like, get me out of here.
That was always my biggest problem with Christianity and the whole concept of God and everything like that. Growing up was the fact that everything is given to him, but he does nothing. Like you can't even your own accomplishments. You can't revel in your own accomplishments, your own power to get things done in your life. It's like, I'm sorry, like God did not stay up until 3 o'clock in the morning studying for that exam. I did, right? I didn't. God didn't show up at the classroom 3 hours, after going to sleep, to take the exam. I did. He didn't pass the test. I did. Oh no, but he gave you the brain to do it. No, my mother did that. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, well, I developed the brain to do it. How about that? Like
exactly.
My brain can only do so much without me training it. And I hated that deeply, like the giving credit. Like to also bounce back to the alleged like worshippers. I can't really say that people worship that god because it's more like they just kind of beg him for shit.
Yes.
And then like kind of guiltily retroactively give him credit for stuff he had nothing to do with so that they can validate their belief in him. Like because I once like had this like discussion with my father who's kind of an agnostic, I would say, like very into like he thinks that what I do magic wise is like role playing, but then he'll go to like a spoon bending class. You know what I mean? Like so anyway, like I'm like, okay, whatever. So fairly logical man sometimes, but can't resist like curiosity. And we were having like discussions about God or whatever, is God real and things like that. And I was like, well, as someone who does talk to gods that are definitely real, I'm gonna say from their perspective, like, why the fuck would he answer you? You haven't given him an offering ever. Like you've never given him an offering ever. You just ask for shit and then you wait and then you keep asking for shit. You keep asking for shit. If everyone asked me for shit, I would stop answering my calls too. Like I would just like, if you didn't pay me, if you didn't give me anything, like I would stop. And I'm like, sure, give me credit for that thing I have nothing to do with, but like weird of you to do. Like I'm not interested. I'm still answering the calls. Okay, like like just a block.
I like to go with George Carlin on that one. It's like, God's divine plan. God has a divine plan. It's a divine plan. Like, who the fuck are you to presume on God's divine plan? Like, if every schmuck with a $3 fucking prayer book and, fuck up God's divine plan, what's the point of it being a divine plan? Like...
And then it's like, why are you the only one in on it?
And
you don't even have a car. Like,
yeah, exactly.
You didn't even know it was raining today. You're getting soaked. And you claim to know what's going to happen at the end of the world. Like, I'm good. Like, I'm all right. Thank you.
Yeah, no. Just, I mean, and a lot of people, so there's one thing, I want to see what your perspective is on this. So I have a perspective that I know for a fact that Mystic is going to disagree with, and I know a lot of people are going to disagree with, but it's my perspective. So a lot of people definitely throw in this idea that if you believe in something, or if enough people believe in something and call on it, then it makes it real, right? It gives it power. I call bullshit. I don't believe in God. I don't believe in Jesus. I don't believe the 8 billion people that are on this planet that believe in Jesus, that could believe in Jesus, would ever make Jesus real. I can see it in Mystic's face. He's like tensing up. He's like,
I'm reading chat.
But
you are wrong.
Yeah, right. There you go. I think.
but it's
Hold
not
on.
for what you think.
Let me
for what you
finish.
think.
Let me finish. So I believe that the whole, because the thing is, the whole concept with Jesus, well, before Jesus was Joseph. Joseph was like Jesus 1.0, right? And then Jesus came out.
There's like a bunch more point O's, you know, like
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, like there's a lot more, and like that's why the stories don't really add up because they're kind of jumbly,
Yep,
um,
exactly.
plagiarized and thrown together. I'm reading a text right now about like the 16 crucified saviors, Christianity before Christ. It's very interesting.
Oh, that's nice. That's like going like into some
Yeah.
zeitgeist type shit.
Well, it's an old like 1800s academic work.
Okay,
Like
nice,
got it on Kindle. So
nice. But yeah,
yeah.
that's my perspective. I do not believe that any amount of people believing Jesus is ever going to make Jesus real. I do not. I believe that Catholicism was the strongest point of Christianity when it started. Catholicism, and I keep repeating this, was a political identity when it started. It was not a religion. It incorporated God after the fact to scare the shit out of the peasants so they would fall in line, which is why Catholicism is the only religion in the fucking planet that has a fucking president, the Pope, right? I mean, the Vatican isn't, the Vatican isn't a city in Rome. It's a fucking country in and of itself. It has its own laws. It has its own military. It has its own treasury department, everything. It is a society inside of Rome. And people think it's just like this beautiful city where, the Pope, no, it's not.
No.
And there's so much that people don't understand about that. And they have successfully brainwashed billions of fucking people, right? To believe in the bullshit that they're spewing, on top of the fact of openly saying, yeah, we've got like thousands of years of literature that we're hiding from you in our basement, but because we're like your parents, right, you wouldn't want to give something that's going to hurt your child, right? So we're going to hide all of this from you so you can't read it, so you can't hurt yourself. No, you're hiding it because everything you have down there proves how full of shit you actually are.
Mm.
And I mean, that's my unpopular opinion, and I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that, but I'm curious of what you think about it.
So this is my identity outside of the theistic Satanist comes in, because like I've been a chaos magician for a long time, so I hold different. If you're familiar with chaos magic and like paradigm shifting, like I can hold several different like worldviews at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of like hard to explain, because my follow-up question is like, well, how are we defining real?
That's what I was going to say earlier.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
because no, I don't believe that Jesus ever existed in the way that people conceptualize him at all. That was completely fabricated. That was an anti-Semitic agenda, on the part of the Romans. That was entirely manufactured. That's why he resembles a fucking Roman god so much. Like, it was to assimilate Hebrews into Roman society. It was a form of ethnic cleansing. Like, it was not religious at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it weird how to this day people who are not Christian feel compelled to defend a fictional character from a religion they don't practice. Very weird. So I think there is some power to the repetition and the manufacturing, the egregore, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
of that invention. But I don't think it is something that really can answer prayers. I don't think it is something that can really protect you. I think it is something that others may wear a mask of it. And frankly, if I was like a true evil entity, right? If the devil was like just evil or whatever, and I was him, I would disguise myself as like Jesus. It'd be perfect. So like I would like that's what I would wear. I wouldn't come scary and evil looking. I would come as a nice blonde Jesus. For everybody to like to trust and believe in. I'm an ascended master. Like, I'm gonna teach you Kundalini. Like, I'm here.
Right.
So I are there entities that probably mask behind that? Sure. I have, though I've made the mistake of not acknowledging, things that I found out later were real. One example being Satan. So I didn't believe in the devil at all. I didn't believe in this Satan because I was limiting myself to just like the Christian concept of that entity.
Mm-hmm.
And it was through traditional witchcraft, my exploration of like the folkloric devil, which is more complicated than anything biblical,
Mm-hmm.
because he's sort of an egregore of gods past, an egregore of gods that we can't recover the names of, but we could throw out Her and Kronos,
Mm-hmm.
Pan, for a few examples. And so he's much more of a forest entity,
Mm-hmm.
in a wilderness entity rather than like a deliberate adversary of anybody, but
Mm-hmm.
horrifying nonetheless, beautifully so. And so I was seeking him, and I've shared this story before, but like the name I was receiving and the imagery I was receiving through pagan language, not through like Abrahamic language, through pagan language that I would understand. It was very clear I was to call this entity Satan. It was and like that opened up a lot of other
Mm-hmm.
questions and a lot of like other things to explore. So, that's been a journey. So like I don't want to sit here and be like, oh, for sure, like that doesn't exist. I've encountered what I would call angels. I don't like them. I don't like them. I didn't consent to them being there. I didn't really have a belief in them prior. Um, the most of the things people claim to be interacting with and claim that are angels and archangels and whatnot are not them.
Mm-hmm.
They're just like kind of like something else. But I'm talking about the biblically accurate motherfuckers with eyes and shit. Like that's not fun. That's not fun to deal with. Um, I don't know where they come from. I don't care. I don't like it.
Right. Right.
So I know there's things beyond my perception. Um, as I shift paradigms in the future, who knows what I'll discover. So, but I definitely wouldn't trust Jesus if he was real. So, fuck that guy.
I can rock with that. I can rock with that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
and it's fair. It's fair. But I do like what I appreciate about like kind of what you said and how you laid it out is kind of like, no, I'm not 100% like I don't think this person ever actually existed, but if you think he does, then cool, kind of way, so.
I mean, kind of lame, but whatever, your choice.
Right. I mean, so many words, right? I'm paraphrasing, right? But
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
but yeah. So, all right, Mystic. I'm curious. What was the aspect that you wanted to say that you disagreed with? It was the same aspect.
Yeah. First of all, don't call my name into it and then not let me talk.
I'm asking you right now.
I'm just kidding. God, terrible. No, it really for me it really does come down to the definition of what is real, right? When you start thinking about somebody's perspective and what somebody believes is real perception for them, and if enough people mass delusion might be a mass delusion, but it's still a real mass delusion, right? So
I mean, the illusion
define
is right. I mean,
right. It doesn't make it any less real. Then that can be said among anything that we do.
hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
same
you think of
person.
Morpheus
Yeah,
in the Matrix, like
and it's what's not real about it could simply be the present manifestation of how things are at this moment,
Hmm.
right? That doesn't make it unreal. It's like, okay, Jesus, tomato, right? That
Right.
kind of thing. So to me, it's all about how an individual defines real. And I have concerns with I can say that I feel Jesus is not real to me,
Hmm.
but I don't feel comfortable saying that Jesus is not real because to me that kind of negates somebody else's opportunity to believe what they believe and feel how they feel, which is exactly what I'm trying not to do in general.
See,
things.
you know me. I've always had a hard time with that. Like, I can't take into consideration every human
But
possibility of what somebody
it's
thinks or
not about.
feels.
well, I
It's not
can
about
acknowledge, like, I'm actually okay with people acknowledging that Jesus is just like a deific mask to them. Like that would totally be fine with me.
Hmm.
My issue is how like people invent this whole like story, like the real Jesus would have felt this way, the real Jesus would have felt that way. I'm
Hmm.
like, why are we debating a man that was never real? Like, actually, when we look at the facts, when we look at the evidence, there's more evidence suggesting that he was completely manufactured. Even the people he's based on were completely manufactured. Like, and unlike the other prophets he was based on, he didn't deliver any of his promises. So, like, why is this one gaining, like, why is this one so popular? And why do people who are not Christian feel compelled to defend this character? I think there's a deeper question about society's ideas of what that character represents, how hypocritically that those values are represented around us. Like, I find that forgiveness only comes up to excuse fucked up behavior. I don't find forgiveness coming up when accountability is there. I find that like societies are almost harsher to people who take accountability sometimes. Like absolutely like relentless. Oh, you admit to doing that? Da, da, da. It's like, well, how are they going to move forward? Are you mad that you were robbed of the opportunity to punish them and like make them beg for forgiveness? Because that's what it seems like you're mad about, you know. Like what happens when you encounter, because I'm like, it doesn't matter what Jesus did or didn't do, or whether or not it existed. What matters to me is how Christians treat people now, how Christians legislate my rights now, how Christians like are up in my fucking face, and I can't talk about religion without people hearing Christianity. And there's so much diversity in the world of religion. Why do they get to dictate? Like, they're not even the most popular religion in the world. So like, why does they get to dictate like what religion is,
strategy
and what my
and tactics.
rights are as like,
and it's
like
aggressive and violent.
it's mostly not even like that sophisticated of an operation. It's just simply like repetition, brainwashing from an early age, severe violence to punish people who deviate, severe social violence to punish people who naturally deviate. And
well, they're the only ones talking about war, right? They're the only ones, like if you talk to like the or you watch their like podcasts, they're the Christians, the Catholics are the only ones talking about going to war with us. You need to don the armor of Christ. And
war with something always. They're at war with something always, whether it's Harry Potter or yoga, or like they're at war with something, and they flatter themselves, including me, in such a war. And I'm like, well, let's go. Let's have a spiritual war. I would love to like beat you up spiritually. Let's do it. Let's meet at the Sabbath tonight. Like it goes down. Let's do it. And you don't even know what I'm talking about. You won't even show. Every time I go to spiritually beat your ass, I don't see you there. Like, you know? You get on here and you like preach that you remove demons and you remove witchcraft. I'm like, from what? From what though? My witchcraft is everywhere. Like, I don't know. It's just like a silly. It comes back to like, yeah, you're in a collective delusion that I'm not part of. So like, I can't. Like I'm not going to adjust my vibration to be on there, because like I would lose all sense of like humanity doing that. And I'm like, I like being where I am. You know, what can be frustrating is like fully understanding, you know, someone's arguments like that, and they don't have the capacity or the empathy to extend to like your arguments, no matter how much you explain. You know, well, I remember explaining many times as a pagan to people. I was like, well, I'm not like afraid of hell because I remember reincarnating. Like I would give an experience, not just like I was taught this. I have an experience that informs why I believe what I believe. And they're like, no, you didn't. No, you're going to hell for even saying that. And I'm like, how do you know? How do you know? You don't have any memory of hell or memory of heaven or anything like that. I have memories of being other people. Like, I have memories even like very vaguely that are hard to like grasp onto, of being in between being different people. So like, so I know I reincarnate. You know, maybe reincarnation is a watered down version of what really happens, or an overly simplified way of explaining it, but like that's how I can conceptualize it. And I'm going with that one for me. I don't know about you, maybe you do go to hell, you know, but like I visit hell on a regular basis, and like I'm okay with going there forever. Like it's okay.
Rock on. I'm on the reincarnation bandwagon. I mean, that's where I'm at. So, you know, I'm fine with it. But yeah, I mean, and also just to clarify to the people in the chat, like, 'cause I know that there's a few people that, you know, identify, like we have one, we call him the resident Christian, but he's like an Eastern Orthodox Christian, and he's actually a really cool guy. And there's also a few other people. I'm not trying to get you to question what it is that you believe in when it comes to Jesus or Christianity or anything like that. I personally don't give a shit. But I don't want people to feel like I'm attacking them. My belief that Jesus didn't exist is not a personal attack on you. That is merely my opinion. how I view things. And as Angela said, looking at the evidence, there is nothing that proves or says that he's
And
ever
that
actually
doesn't have to
existed.
negate your spiritual. That doesn't have to negate your spiritual experience. Like, again, as a chaos magician, I don't think something has to be ever have had to be tangible for it to be meaningful to you. I don't think Lilith ever walked the earth. Okay, like I was devoted to her for 6 years exclusively. I'm writing a book about her right now. I love her dearly. I talk to her often. Like, I never believed she was really like the first woman. Okay, like it's a myth. There's a value in myth that you're missing if you take things literally. And I think like you owe it to whatever face of deity you have, like to look
Mm-hmm.
deeper into the myth beyond like just taking it as a literal story, as a literal event. You're gonna inevitably miss out. So like if you choose to believe what you choose to believe, like give yourself the credit to understand the difference between like belief and the value of belief and the tool of belief versus getting enmeshed in a literalist
Mm-hmm.
interpretation of it that's going to limit you.
Exactly.
It's notorious even in Satanism. Like there's, you know,
Oh, it is.
there are what we call like reverse Christians, which is a little bit derogatory, but like is a reason why like devil worshiper has a negative connotation. I like to reclaim it because
Mm-hmm.
there's no point, you know, in my position sugarcoating anything. There's no point. I'm gonna go with the furthest thing that's gonna upset you just to see if we're able to have the conversation to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So like, if you can't handle me saying like devil worshiper, you know, blood offering, things like that, then we're not going to get anywhere anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You're already determined to see me a particular way, so I'm like okay with that. You know, like there's no way of getting around that. So
Yeah.
yeah, you know, I take it on, but there's definitely people who take like who read into biblical stories about Satan like so literally. You know, and I'm like, well, it's interesting as a story because yes, we can infer this about Satan as a character that's interesting or inspiring or whatever. But like until you talk to Satan about it, it really has no value to
Mm-hmm.
him and your relationship to him. Like until you explore it with him, like in a way that he will explain things to you that are not written there, that maybe only you understand, that like it has no real value to you other than fitting into a group, other than like repeating what makes other people comfortable. And so I think there's more value in things not being literally real,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So that's me. And that's I think the issue with like how religiosity is in the West right now. I come across it like with pagans and polytheists who are like, well, like Loki really was a spider, really did. And I'm like, I don't think so. Like, you know, I don't think so. I think like I think Loki is a deity that is beyond your comprehension, and he communicated with primitive peoples who were still very smart with these images, and these people understood these were images and like made them into stories and told them to their children. And now you think it's like a factual biography of
Mm-hmm.
this deity, and it's like not. It's just a myth,
Mm-hmm.
and like, and I say just a myth, but like myths are so powerful if you understand them as myths, and that's kind of like you know why I haven't published my book yet because there's a myth in it. There's a modern myth in it,
Mm-hmm.
um, a retelling, a different perspective, and not in the way people are used to, like a retelling of a myth where it's like, well, this is what really happened. It's just like this is just a different way of it happening. This is just a different way of it happening, and it means something different. It conveys something different. And I think like if you're gonna get into the occult, more than philosophy, more than or if you're getting into spirituality at all or religiousness especially, like more than philosophy, more than practice, more than all that, like be comfortable with storytelling. Like this is how you stay like
Mm-hmm.
pretty rooted in who you are without being dragged into someone else's story.
Mm-hmm.
If you can recognize a narrative right away, like this happens like in real life, this happens in text, this happens in like texts that you read and absorb as religious stories that you take on as part of your story. This is important. You know, our myths about different deities like can tell us something about ourselves spiritually. You know, so much of my life didn't make sense to me until like I awakened to being, you know, a devotee of Satan. I was like, oh, that explains why I'm blamed for fucking everything. And the more I try to explain myself, the more I get lost in this
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And if I embrace this kind of like abrasive, present, charismatic form of myself that may ruffle some feathers, more people resonate with that. More people are attracted to me when I do that. More people respect me when I do that. And that's because of this, wavelength and vibration that for whatever reason, like I'm drawn to and I have to embody and I have to serve. And I've served many gods before him. So like I know what that kind of is like to acclimate to that vibration. And I feel like too many people are expecting the story to do the work for them. Well, we've explained it. It's like, well, are you like, are you doing it? Like, are you like, have you thought about what that means? Like, and one thing I loved seeing other chaos magicians doing was taking like any book that means something to you and treating it like a sacred text and reading it like a sacred text. So that you take like a childhood story you loved, and treat it like a sacred text and like, okay, this sentence that I like did some bibliomancy to get, what does this sentence say about my day today? Like doing like in more like inductive divination, I call it, like where you are looking for meaning in something that appears to not have meaning initially. And like I think I did that with the book Bridge to Terabithia, which meant a lot to me in middle school. And I gained like some really powerful insights about not just what the text had been saying, it's a story about grief and loss in childhood, but just like little moments in the text that out of context or whatever, like had something to say. And then in the context had even more to say when I put it together with the subtext and with like my life. Like, and of course the author didn't intend for any of that personal shit to be drawn out of it. But that's what gnosis is, and that's what the spirituality is, and that's why it's important to keep your own records of like your own growth. And so that's more valuable than fitting into like a category, like, but people want to fit into a category and like it'd be like, oh, I'm a Christian, I'm a Hindu, I'm this. And like really when you get into like self-exploration and you're really touching the divine, yeah, you can still generally fit into like a category if you want to say that, but like you're gonna reach points where there's gonna be uncategorized things. There's gonna be things that are like difficult to explain even to people in your group.
Right. No, definitely. Well, I mean, this has definitely been an amazing conversation. So we're way over time. It's an hour-long show, but it's okay. But I would like to have you on again to kind of dig into Lilith a little bit, because I mean, I also work with Lilith, and I mean, I've had people tell me that she would never work with me because I'm a man, but that's not true. At least,
Weirdly enough, it's only misogynists saying that. Like a kind of weird.
So, but I definitely love working with Lilith, but I would love to kind of like live compare notes and see, because I have this thing that I call kind of like the unholy trinity. And now, mind you, I call it the unholy trinity. There's nothing out there saying that this is actually the unholy trinity. No, this is my version of it. So I'm a dedicant of Baphomet, and again, a lot of people would say Baphomet doesn't even exist, but that's a conversation for another day. I put Baphomet on the pinnacle, as Baphomet is, in my opinion, the balance of the masculine and the feminine, and all things that kind of exist simultaneously. And then from that, there's Lucifer and there's Lilith. And for me, that is kind of like the unholy trinity, and that's kind of like the focus of my work, is those three entities. And up until now, I mean, it's been amazing. But I would love to dig into that with you if you're willing to come on again.
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
Awesome. So, Angela, thank you very much for coming on the show. Greatly appreciate it. We love having you. Everyone in the chat, thank you for being here. You guys are fucking amazing. Love your faces, my lovely demons. All right. Mystic, thanks for hanging out in the corner like you do. He likes to listen, right? I always give him shit because he doesn't talk during interviews.
Talk plenty.
So,
when your mouth isn't flapping.
Sometimes. So, anyway, thank you, everybody. We greatly appreciate it. And as always, hail thy fucking self. We'll see you in the next one. Peace the fuck out.
Thank you.
And